If you've been a fan of the D-pad for a while, no doubt you've heard me gush about one of my favorite games on the Sega Genesis, Wonder Boy in Monster World. It's a fun little sword and sorcery adjacent early light Metroidvania action platformer with mild RPG elements and a dash of puzzles for flavor. It's a charming title that I still adore to this day. But this game didn't just come out of nowhere. It was actually the fifth in a six and, as of 2018, 7 game franchise, a series that has seen a number of re-releases and ports over the years. So when I found myself with an opportunity to review Wonder Boy Collection, the latest such set of re-releases for the Nintendo Switch and PlayStation 4 and 5, I couldn't resist diving back into this series one more time. A few acknowledgements and disclosures up front. I was given a review code for this compilation for free, so you should be seeing a little paid promotion thing somewhere in the top corner of the screen. This is the Switch version of the collection, which would be important to note in case of any performance issues, of which I noticed none. And Wonder Boy Collection is not to be confused with the limited-time physical release Wonder Boy Anniversary Collection, currently available in quickly expiring quantities from strictly limited games. Wonder Boy Collection costs $30 and contains 4 titles in their original formats: Wonder Boy in Monsterland, Wonder Boy in Monster World, and Monster World 4, and does not include the 3rd and 4th releases in the series, Wonder Boy 3 Monster Lair and Wonder Boy 3 The Dragon's Trap. Yes, I know there are 2 3s there, it's complicated. Regardless, this video is covering the 4-game Wonder Boy collection, so let's get into this. Or rather, before we get into this, let's quickly check out the collection's main menu. It's bare bones, to put it lightly. It feels a bit like a DVD menu, immediately listing the 4 available games, as well as a gallery mode of numerous official artworks and credits for the collection overall. The music is pretty basic, and nothing in the main menu moves or animates, so it's a bit of an abrupt experience, not a lot of flash or flair. Each game has a somewhat clunky save state menu with 6 slots, as well as a controls page that keeps everything weirdly shoved to the left, but does allow you to rebind everything. And video options that let you choose between stretched full screen, 4:3 anamorphic pixel ratio, or 1:1 square pixel ratio, alongside sizing options such as Perfect, which multiplies the source game's resolution by the highest integer factor that it can, and Perfect 1x, which uses the original game resolution, which has to be one of the more confusing options I've seen in a game in an extremely long time. If you're someone who's into scan lines and faux CRT effects, they have some of these available as well. Some games have minor quality of life improvements in the form of button combo macros, like the high jump in Wonder Boy, which is normally running or moving forward before hitting jump, and the substantially more confusing wiggle jump in Wonder Boy in Monsterland, which doesn't seem to have any real function whatsoever. Why is this here? Each game also has a rewind and fast forward feature, defaulting to the left and right triggers respectively, and you will need these for the first 2 games in the collection. Speaking of which, let's start by diving into the first game in the series and the first one in the collection, the original Wonder Boy. In this timed side-scrolling arcade title, we control our hero Wonder Boy, or Tom, or Boy? It's complicated. Anyway, we control our hero Wonder Boy as he navigates a series of 7 areas with 4 rounds apiece, chasing down an evil character known only as King, or Drancon in the Game Gear version for some reason, in order to rescue his girlfriend Tina, or Tanya in the Master System version for some reason. Why are they so fucking weird with these names? Wonder Boy is an odd duck. At first blush, it seems like an extremely simple game. Originally a 2-button arcade title, Wonder Boy can be made to jump or attack. Or attack. Attack! Oh, great, my health is going down while I'm standing here trying to figure out how to attack. Let's just run for it. Maybe I can jump on this enemy and... Huh. Yeah, so a few things. First of all, that meter in the top is referred to in-game as Vitality, but it's not a health meter in the traditional sense. It's more of a replenishable timer. As you navigate through the game, food will appear that Wonder Boy can collect in order to add to his vitality and last longer. Letting it go down to 0 costs the player a life and sends them back to the most recent checkpoint they reached, indicated by a signpost with a number on it. Second, enemies deal contact damage to Wonder Boy, but not in the form of reducing his vitality. No, touching any enemy in the entire game will immediately kill Wonder Boy. 1 hit, dead. Same goes for fire and boulders, too. On the other hand, stepping on a large rock or running too quickly and hitting the corner of a ledge will cause Wonder Boy to trip, as well as reduce some of his vitality. Very confusing. But if you want to get these enemies out of the way, we're going to need a weapon. Thankfully, throughout the game's levels, you'll find large eggs that contain a number of power-ups, such as Wonder Boy's one and only weapon in the game, a stone axe. Wait, is one of his nicknames Tom because that's supposed to be a tomahawk? You're gonna need to get used to the downward arc trajectory this thing takes. Oh, and only 2 of them can be on screen at a time, leaving you pretty vulnerable if you miss too much during a tense situation. Eggs can also contain vitality-enriched milk, invincibility in the form of an angel companion, or even a skateboard, helmet, and pads. What? So, the skateboard is an interesting upgrade. If Wonder Boy takes damage or stumbles while on his skateboard, rather than dying immediately or losing vitality, he'll just lose the skateboard and revert back to normal. In addition, however, he'll automatically move to the right, which can only be slowed down or sped up, but not stopped outright, and faster at that. Speaking of which, this game has, like, extra controls. So for one, if you hold down the attack button, you can also run, which, to be fair, even Super Mario Bros. Does. But then there's the jump. So if you hit the jump button, you get this dinky little thing. You don't want to do that, like literally pretty much ever in the whole game. Instead, you want to either move forward or hold down the attack button to run, preferably both. And if you do that, the jump will literally be twice as high. That'll be fun in the middle of a tense platforming segment, surely. Like I mentioned before, though, Wonder Boy Collection has a few of those quality of life adjustments, including mapping the run button to the right bumper by default, and the high jump button to the left bumper, which is going to take a little getting used to. Also, how they function in-game is a little weird. The run button seems to bypass attacking altogether, even though the game shouldn't have a means of just doing that. I mean, even in Sonic Origins, when you use a drop dash, there's a single frame where Sonic stops, gets into a spin dash, and releases. So it's very interesting to see how this is being done here. Especially considering, I noticed while playing that when I would use the high jump button, Wonder Boy would often step forward exactly 1 pixel first, indicating that the game is essentially hitting right and attack and then jump on the next frame. So, no idea there. But I have to say, these micros are definitely a lifesaver. Granted, using the bumpers is a little awkward when the left and right triggers control emulated rewind and fast forward. Honestly though, I'm not going to complain about the rewind, we'll get there. I've been talking about the controls for what, a minute or two solid now? Let's get into the actual gameplay itself. We got 7 areas to get through to rescue Tina, and each area is composed of 4 rounds. I already said all that. Each round is full of platforming challenges in various environments, as well as enemies attacking from the front and even sometimes from behind. Most enemies are pretty straightforward. Snails move along the ground extremely slowly, spiders descend from above, bats swoop down to attack, but there are a few that really stand out as particularly painful to deal with. First off, there's frogs. The frogs suck. They take 2 hits to kill, and they're awful. And I'll be honest, I got flustered at first and didn't even realize there are 2 different kinds of frog. Gray ones that literally just sit there, and blue ones which will jump forward when either struck once or if you get too close, which includes if the blue frog jumps too close to you after you hit it the first time. I cannot tell you how many times I died because I accidentally whacked a frog into a frenzy so it landed on me. Wonderful. There's also these fucking bizarre guys that book it at you from behind and also take 2 hits. And if they've got red eyes, they'll fucking jump. Good luck figuring out which one they are in the quarter second you have to react. I found out entirely after I finished playing this game that apparently they're triggered by these little red flowers appearing the moment they leave the screen, which has to be the single least well-telegraphed thing I've ever seen in a video game. Like, seriously, tell me you would see this little red flower in the middle of a forest and think of it as anything other than background decoration. Like, what? Oh, and in addition to all these enemies, there's also the spotted egg. Do not touch the spotted egg, or a little devil will come out instead of an angel and wick away your vitality even faster than before until you're down to just 2 pips remaining, which gives you mere seconds to find more vitality or you're shit out of luck. On the plus side, if you get a game over at any point, all you have to do is click the left stick to add credits, and you can continue not just from the same round you were already in, but even from the exact same checkpoint. That's a hell of an olive branch after all this mess. The platforming in this game is inconsistent, to put it lightly, which is saying something because about half this game's levels are literally reused whole cloth in the back half, just with harder enemy placement to up the difficulty. Most of the jumps are relatively reasonable, but a few of them are just absurd, like this spot in Area 5 Round 1, where clouds are descending so quickly that trying to high jump your way out of here will actually get you killed. This is, in fact, the one part of the game where you want the low jump in order to scale them and proceed. And then there's Area 7 Round 2. Right at the end of the level, there's another set of rapidly descending clouds, but much further apart. It looks impossible. It feels impossible. For a little while, I was genuinely convinced it was impossible. You need to run and high jump, because running gives you just a little more height, then continue to run forward and high jump immediately for the chance of, like, glitching through the cloud and allowing you to jump a 3rd time to reach the next cloud. And I know what you're thinking, well, that sucks, but at least you can just keep pumping in credits and trying again. But no. Oh, you sweet summer child, no. This game has a special flavor of cruel to drizzle all over the shit sundae. In the final area, if you get a game over, the game immediately ends. even if you already had credits ready to go. And let me tell you, the challenges in Area 7 are on another level altogether. I cannot fathom playing this game, dropping a few bucks to get to Area 7, only to get a game over and realize I can't even pay to continue. At this point, I abused the rewind like there was no tomorrow. In fairness, I didn't just undo deaths, I rewound all the way to the last checkpoint to at least vaguely imitate a standard game over, but if it weren't for the rewind, I would not have finished this game, full stop. And that's not even mentioning the bosses. At the end of round 4 in every area, King comes out to fight Wonder Boy directly, throwing fireballs that must be dodged lest they kill our hero. Each time you kill King, whatever head he had falls off, replaced with a new member of the animal kingdom, and he runs off to be found at the end of the next area with even harder attack patterns to dodge. And these battles start to take a while, too. Each encounter takes more and more hits, meaning you need to show up with increasing levels of vitality if you want to have a shot at surviving them. On the plus side, they always make sure to give you some of that tasty milk right before, though this milk only recovers a portion of your vitality instead of filling it completely. Of course, upon defeating King for the final time in Area 7, Wonder Boy is able to rescue Tina, and after a brief celebration and telling of your score, you're treated to the arcade's favorite ultimate congratulations screen, the game over. And that's the end of Wonder Boy. Unless, of course, you happen to pick up enough of these little dolls hidden throughout the game. No joke, I played all 4 games in this collection, 16 hours in total, before I went online and realized that if you collect the secret doll hidden in every level, there's an Area 8. So I did it. I replayed the entire game with tons of rewind this time around and collected all 28 dolls spread throughout the first 7 areas, and you won't believe the bullshit you have to go through to get them all. Some of them, thank fuck, are just out in the open, completely visible, easy to spot, easy to handle. Most of them, however, are hidden, and revealing them is absolute horseshit. Like, oh my god. Some of the hidden dolls are revealed when you trip over a specific rock in the stage. And there's nothing that indicates which rock it is, you just have to, know, or else you lose vitality by throwing yourself at random rocks and praying. Some of them are revealed when you bump into specific enemies or campfire obstacles. I cannot stress to you enough that there is literally zero indication as to what needs to be done to unveil the hidden doll, and these enemies and obstacles normally kill you if you touch them, so guess wrong, and that's a death. And then there's Area 3, Round 2. I've seen some cryptic shit in video games in my time, but never have I encountered anything, even remotely like this. In order to reveal the hidden doll in this round, you need to locate a blue frog that is facing right instead of left. Then, while also dodging other enemies and obstacles, you need to play leapfrog with it by jumping over it and letting it jump past you. Do this 4 times, and the hidden doll will appear. What in the unholy hell were they thinking? Anyway, once you've dealt with this absolute garbage, you come across King at the end of Area 7, defeat him, and discover that Tina is not waiting for you as she normally is. And your prize is Area 8. Just an outrageously difficult series of rounds with abominably cruel enemy placement, including on the second hardest series of jumps in the game. It was already hard enough in Area 3 Round 1, where you have to run as far to the right and high jump as late as you possibly can in order to survive to the end of the level, but in Area 8 Round 3, they had bats. Simple little bats, in the most frustrating configuration possible so as to make this absolute carnage trying to get by. Oh, and did I mention that Area 8 also instantly ends when you game over? So yeah, rewinding galore here. Thank you, Wonderboy Collection, for that little number, by the way. If you torture yourself enough to reach the end of Area 8 Round 4, you'll go up against King for the 8th and final time. And let me tell you, you are going to need all the vitality you can get to even stand a chance here. I had to rewind just to get here with enough to last, and in one case I even ran out after beating King. But when you do manage to beat him once and for all, his head falls off, still alive, and you reunite with Tina once more. What the fuck? And after you tally up all those new points, including the 4 dolls I somehow managed to acquire even without meaning to, there's that glorious game over screen again. This game is so hard, you guys, especially if you're trying to play and beat Area 8. God help you if you actually try to do it on real arcade hardware. Bring your college fund, you'll need it. This is the kind of game you play for a few minutes and go, oh damn, this thing's gonna kick my ass, huh? Then put it down. It's the burger time of arcade platformers. And if you can believe it, it's gonna get worse before it gets better. Wonder Boy in Monsterland is the follow-up to the original, landing in arcades in 1987 before receiving its multitude of console ports in the 35 years since. Taking place 11 years after the first Wonder Boy game, our hero Wonder Boy must square off against a new threat in the form of the Mecha Dragon. And even more importantly, his full name is revealed to be Bok Lee Temjin, or Book, or still Tom Tom. Or just Wonder Boy. What the hell is up with all these alternate names? The 2017 remaster of its sequel, The Dragon's Trap, refers to the hero as having given up his skateboard for a sword and shield. But then the 2018 distant sequel to the franchise, Monster Boy and the Cursed Kingdom, appears to show Boy and Book as being two different people, so I have no idea. Monsterland is our first glimpse of the future of the franchise, incorporating the seeds of the action RPG elements that would come to be the standard for the series going forward. Wonder Boy can now freely move left and right, and as soon as he's given a sword at the start of round 1, this opening looks familiar. He can attack freely for the rest of the game. This time, rather than simply racing to the right to find a goal marker to exit the level, Wonder Boy must locate the stage's boss and defeat them to claim a key, which will open a locked door and complete the stage. And there are technically fewer stages this time around, though they've grown considerably in size, often having 3 or 4 screens to them, with the final one having a whopping 12. But we'll get there when we get there. One of the most important additions to this game to help facilitate the RPG creep of the series is the shop system. Throughout the game, Wonder Boy will find doors that lead into a number of facilities that can help him. Some are shops selling armor that reduces damage taken by enemies, shields that reduce knockback when deflecting enemy projectiles, or boots that increase run speed and jump height. Others can recover some of your health, such as the hospital, which heals you to full strength, or the bar, which will do significantly less but does provide you with valuable hints about the level, and I mean it, some of these hints are absolutely critical. For example, the boss of round 6 is a Sphinx. He'll ask you some inane, randomly generated question with a randomly generated answer, and if you didn't hear what the Sphinx gets up to at night from the bartender earlier on in the stage, then you're just gonna have to guess. Guess wrong, and you've got yourself a really difficult boss battle in store, but guess right, and the Sphinx just congratulates you and lets you walk into round 7 without a fight. Anyway, some shops will even sell you magic spells you can use to augment your fighting skills, but of course there's no such thing as a free lunch. In order to afford all these lovely upgrades, you're going to need to defeat enemies, and lots of them. The problem is, the way enemies work in this game is weird. After you defeat an enemy, they'll randomly drop money, hearts, magic spells, or some temporary items, and will often respawn nearby for you to kill again. Where the issue arises is that on repeat kills, enemies will exclusively drop items that award points but do nothing else. Which means unless you're desperate for an extra heart that you're awarded at certain point thresholds, the only reason to re-kill enemies is to get them out of your way. And to make matters worse, because the game is still a linear sequence of rounds, and because you can only kill an enemy once for a chance at earning money, you're frequently going to find yourself well short of however much you need in order to buy that next equipment upgrade. And you only have access to the next 2 available upgrades in the equipment tree, meaning unless you do continue to buy them, you're going to plateau and stagnate. Fortunately, weapon upgrades in this game are completely free, meaning you're never limited by your wallet when it comes to dealing damage. Unfortunately, rather than obtaining them from shops, the only way to upgrade your weapon is by locating hidden doors which contain a secret, usually quite difficult boss encounter within. Find and defeat all 4 secret bosses and you can earn the Sword of Legend, a blade that'll be turning up again and again in this series. The boss encounters are done up a little differently this time around, and my first thought upon entering a fight was how similar it was to the battles in the NES game Monster Party. Tiny little one-on-one fights against bosses with attack patterns to be combated and countered. Now granted, all of this is well and good, but it's still an arcade game at the end of the day, and that means we still have arcade mechanics. For one, the timer system has been retained, but it's been reworked a bit. Rather than having a timed vitality meter and one-hit kill enemies, Wonder Boy now has a hybrid health system involving discrete hearts alongside a special hourglass. Enemies no longer kill Wonder Boy in a single hit, but will rather do a certain amount of damage depending on the strength of the armor he's wearing. And as for the hourglass, anytime it fully empties, Wonder Boy takes 1 heart of damage and it flips over to begin counting down time again. So, 3 problems here. First, the hourglass only has a few visible steps compared with the long meter of the previous game, meaning it can be tough to tell exactly when that heart of damage is going to be taken. Second, due to enemies only being able to drop hearts the first time they're killed, and only sometimes, you'll be far more starved for hearts in this game than you ever were for food in the first one. Third, if you ever reach 0 hearts, that's a game over. No extra lives here at all, though at least credits will bring you back to the most recent screen you were on. And if you aren't stockpiling magic spells and racking up weapon and equipment upgrades, you're gonna be hurting in this game. Most of the bosses in Monsterland are pretty comprehensible and fair, but all of this stops when you reach round 8. For starters, the last screen of the level is outright torture. The ground is iced over, which means you slide all over the fucking place, but your enemies don't. Which kinda sucks when contact damage is still a thing, especially when enemies can end up stun locking you by bouncing on your head until you die. These little yetis take a ton of fucking hits too, which means if you knock them back too far, they fall into this shallow water, which makes them extremely hard to see, and God help you if you make it past these guys to the boss, because the hobgoblin will fuck you up something fierce. I'm gonna be straight with you. You will need revival potions to survive this fight. It's insane. He jumps around the arena with an attack that outreaches your sword. Great. But if you're especially unlucky, he'll start using this weird rainbow laser attack. Good news, you can deflect this attack with your shield. Bad news, he aims it at your head. You will not successfully block his attack. If he uses it, you will take damage. You're fucked. It sucks so hard. I cheated. I used rewind like a motherfucker. And this isn't even the most egregiously unfair boss fight. That's how much it sucks. That honor, by the way, goes to the boss of the very next level, the Snow Kong of round 9. The Snow Kong is borderline impossible. Not a joke. This is without a doubt one of the most absurdly bullshit bosses I've encountered in any video game in my entire life. The Snow Kong doesn't attack you directly. It doesn't need to. It's got company. The Snow Kong is going to generate up to 3 tinier Yeti bitches, each of which can make up to 2 of those bastard ice cubes. That means up to 10 things on screen that can all do contact damage and straight up juggle you to death. It's hell. This is hell. I used rewind and so should you. This is a level of brutality I never knew was possible. Both this and the previous level took me almost an hour each. And that was with excessive rewinding. It would have cost me, and I counted, hundreds of credits otherwise. Round 10 is a lot less brutal, but it's your last chance to load up on equipment and magic, and trust me, if you don't, you'll be in for just a world of hurt. The final round, the Labyrinth of No End, is an absolute gauntlet. Alongside trying to navigate a series of 12 rooms, 4 times the size of any other level in the game, where choosing the wrong exit loops you back around to the ones you've already been through, you'll also have to endure a boss rush at the same time. And if you walk down the wrong hallway and have to redo an area, you have to refight that boss too. Fortunately, thank God, the Snow Kong does not appear here, instead replaced by Giant Kong, a secret boss from earlier in the game who is not as bullshit. But the Hobgoblin does. With a bit of luck, you can do some damage from the platform above him though, so it's not quite as garbage as it could be. All that aside, this stage does feature the first iteration of what will eventually become my favorite track in the entire franchise. Give this thing a listen. I didn't mention the music in the first game at all because it's basically just like 2 level tracks for the entire thing, nothing to really write home about, but Monsterland is much more diverse, with a soundtrack that sounds appropriate for a Master System or Game Gear title. Anyway, what is garbage is this goddamn fucking hourglass. Your ass is gonna be firmly planted against the wall the entire time, and some wrong choices in the labyrinth can lose you entire minutes of progress. You legitimately may want to just draw up a map to remember which way to go, just to make it even remotely possible. Like, look at this fucking room. It's just 2 platforms. You land on one, and it starts to drop, so you gotta jump to the other. But then that one drops. You gotta jump to the first one, then it moves again. And if you're wearing the wrong boots, the speed you move at makes this virtually impossible. And you have to do it like 30 fucking times. Perfectly. Because if you fall, you gotta redo the room below it again. And then you gotta start all over. And once you reach the top of the thing, there's an enemy to kill. And when you kill that enemy, they give you another pair of platforms. I spent like 10 fucking minutes on this with rewind. This one room. And then, the game fucking punks you out. At several points in the labyrinth, all enemies on the screen need to be defeated in order for the way forward to be revealed. So here we come to a room where a secret boss just called Demon appears. Going to the right brings you back to an old area, and falling into a nearby pit brings you back to an old area as well. So you beat the demon and a few regular enemies start to appear. You take out one of these weird sea creatures and then a second before a third one appears right here in the corner. Spoiler, the only way to kill this thing is with magic, thanks to the exact spot that it's in, and a pretty decent amount of it too. You can't downstab in this game, and if you try to jump into the gap between it and the piece of wall, you'll immediately be juggled to death and have to play the entire game again because, surprise, the last round once again does not care whether you have credits or not. Oh my fucking god. I spent an embarrassingly long time trying to deal with this, until managing to do just enough damage to kill this enemy. And the result? Another fucking enemy shows up in the corner, and I don't have enough magic to kill it. I'm at a loss for words. I literally just stand there, dumbfounded. And so, I reluctantly make a tragic choice. I let that game over wash over me, and then I started the game entirely over. Yes, I played this entire game a second time just to try and accrue and save magic just for this little green asshole. Along the way, I try to be more attentive to my surroundings. See, at various points early into your journey, Wonder Boy will hear someone nearby or notice something wrong around him. Pressing up against a blank spot in the wall will then reveal a secret door leading to hidden shops, secret boss encounters for weapon upgrades, or even especially useful characters who initiate a game-long trade sequence. Except halfway through the game, you stop getting warned about it and basically just have to start randomly hitting up all over the place in the hopes of guessing your way to what you need, which I should remind you, takes time to do. On my second playthrough, I was careful to kill every enemy I could in order to attempt to buy better equipment. Still wasn't enough, by the way. Made a point of winning the Sword of Legend and continued the trade sequence, including stumbling across an entire separate mini-dungeon by playing the trade sequence flute at the top of a hill Wonder Boy normally just notes as having a nice view, until round 10, where I was given a final choice. I could cash in my trade sequence for a bell, which would make a chime sound when I approached the correct exit to use to advance through the labyrinth of no end, or a ruby, which wasn't the bell, and I was already abusing rewind by this point anyway, so obviously whatever the ruby did would be better. So I make it back to the demon room, take out the boss, and start dealing with the sea creatures. Something worth noting is that it seems at least a few magic spells do damage based on your equipped weapon, which was great news for me now that I had the Sword of Legend. I finally deal with the corner enemies, and another one spawns, just off to the side. In fact, a new one just kind of kept showing up for a while. Something felt off, especially when they started arriving with significantly more health than normal. See, every enemy and boss in the game has a little icon that indicates their current health, starting at blue and working through the color spectrum down to red, similar to Dynamite Heady if you're familiar with it. Though in that game there's also a health icon in the corner as well. The colored spot doesn't so much tell you what percentage of their health is left per se, but rather roughly how many hits it'll take for you to kill them. Meaning if you upgrade your weapon fast enough, some enemies and even bosses will start out with less than blue health, including these sea creatures. Except for this one after a few respawns. It shows up blue and takes far more hits. Something wasn't right, and eventually I got frustrated and fell down the hole again, passing by familiar enemies only to discover more enemies than usual spawning in. This room is different from the old one. Not only is this a separate, further along room, but it means I never had to replay this entire game in the first place. Granted, it's a good thing I did, because eventually you come to reach this extremely mechanical-looking hallway, which leads to a fight with a large green dragon, the first of many in this series. And this is where the ruby really comes in handy. Upon landing your first hit, the ruby starts to glow and immediately reduces the dragon's health to a mere 4 strikes with the Sword of Legend. Of course, the bad news is that the dragon has a second form, revealing itself to be the tougher mecha dragon, but you know what? More or less wiping out the first phase of a final boss, that's fine. The good news is that the dragon is not actually all that difficult to fight, with only 2 real attack patterns to dodge, and both are pretty easy to avoid. The worst news is that the mecha dragon has an absurd amount of health. It takes 24 hits with the strongest sword in the game, and that takes time. And time takes health. And health takes your sanity, as any game over will send you instantly back to the start of the game, and we're right back where we were with the first game. Honestly, the final boss is a slog, and I literally again died after killing the final boss, what the fuck? But he's not nearly as abusive as King. Hard to say which game is better between the two. Monsterland is mostly easier, but holy hell. Hobgoblin and Snow Kong are absolutely brutal, and the convoluted means of upgrading your weapons and locating what you need to take down the Mecha Dragon make this a much more unforgiving experience. And God fucking help you if you tried to play either this or the original game in arcades. I got curious during editing and decided to keep track of how many credits I needed to get to the last levels of both, and then multiplied that by the number of times I used rewind due to the permanent game over at the end of each. Wonder Boy would have cost me literally hundreds of dollars to finish on an actual coin-in-the-slot arcade machine, and that's assuming I had the patience to replay it dozens of times. Wonder Boy in Monsterland was, oh my god, worse. Like, orders of magnitude worse. Thanks to the Hobgoblin and especially Snow Kong, I would have spent more money just getting to the last level than I did in the entirety of the original game. So that's pre-multiplier. When all was said and done, I shit you not, I would have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars. Hundreds of thousands. More than $250,000. I could not believe my fucking eyes when I double-checked my work. This game would have cost me about as much as a college fucking education. I put up a poll on Twitter asking people, hey, what's the most amount of money you could ever see yourself spending on an arcade game? Everyone got it wrong. You're all wrong. You're all idiots, and I'm the biggest idiot of them all because I was enough of a psychopath to actually fucking finish this game. Did anyone ever actually beat this thing in arcades? I refuse to believe it was even possible. Hallelujah. Holy shit. Where's the Tylenol? Speaking of money, please help me. I need to pay off my Monsterland loans. That's not true. I got a review copy and I paid off my loans. That's a stupid joke, but I'm sure Tom Nook is going to turn up and ring my bell anyway. Are you stressed? Do you like watching me get stressed? Both of those are unhealthy. Stop that. Don't stop watching. I mean, me. I should try not getting so stressed out. It's making me go gray. But we've got a new shirt that'll help that stress just melt away. New at dpad.store, it's Holey Hell. Look at that sheen, that upscaled and smooth font, that beautiful hole, the void. It calls to me. I need to stop playing so many stressful games. So you know what? Let's do that. Actually, before we get back into Wonder Boy Collection, we should talk quickly about two notable absences here. For whatever reason, Wonder Boy Collection contains 4 games from the series, which represents 2/3 of any meaningful subset at a time. We've got 2 of the 3 arcade games, 2 of the 3 games starring Wonder Boy himself, 2 of the 3 games first released on home consoles, and 2 of the 3 games focused on the Peripral line and Space Invaders besides the Mecha Dragon. And if you follow the Japanese naming structure, we've also got 3 of the 4 Monster World games, with Dragon's Trap being the absent second entry there. Now, Wonder Boy Collection, with the arcade versions of Wonder Boy and Monsterland and the Genesis versions of Monster World and Monster World 4, can be bought digitally for the Nintendo Switch or the PlayStation 4 for $30 here in the United States. But the special edition Wonder Boy Anniversary Collection contains all 6 titles, including Monster Lair and the Dragon's Trap, as well as 15 additional ports and regional releases of these 6 titles. The most basic version of it is going for €50 on strictly limited games, or about $54 USD, but they are disappearing fast and the Switch edition is already sold out. There are a few higher up versions available, including a €100 Collector's Edition and a €150 Ultra Collector's Edition that come with a physical copy of the game, as well as a number of bonuses like soundtracks, art books, posters, kitschy stuff that I personally am not normally big on adding to my purchase, but if that matters to you, then there's still plenty of those left, including for the Switch. I think the best bang for your buck here is the €50 physical copy available for the PS4. Just having all 6 games instead of 4 would make it worth the jump, and the ports are kind of a nice touch, especially if you have fond memories of a very specific regional release or port of a game. By comparison, the collector's editions feel sort of egregious, and the non-anniversary Wonder Boy Collection we're looking at today admittedly feels like it was intentionally gutted to make it a more budget-friendly release. I've never played Monster Lair, but I have played and deeply enjoyed Dragon's Trap, both the original and the remake, and it's a real shame to see them missing here. If you're curious about the 2 missing Wonder Boy 3s, Monster Lair throws the franchise's gameplay genre in reverse compared with Monsterland, driving past the one-directional gameplay of Wonder Boy and moving into full-blown shoot-'em-up territory. Every round has 2 parts, an auto-scrolling section on the ground and a side-scrolling shmup in the air, followed with a boss encounter. The medieval fantasy vibe is still strong here, but the attacks feel closer to Gunstar Heroes and Gradius than they do the rest of this series. The other 3, the Dragon's Trap, is essentially the template for the rest of the Wonder Boy franchise. A direct sequel to Monster Land, the Dragon's Trap begins with Wonder Boy battling and defeating the Mecha Dragon, including the return of the final castle theme from Monster Land. Only for the robotic space beast to curse Wonder Boy with its dying breath, transforming him into a lizard man. Traveling through Monsterland, Wonder Boy must take down a number of other stranger dragon foes while trying to return to his human form. A much less linear outing than the 3 before it, the Dragon's Trap sets the stage for a more open-ended Metroidvania-like adventure that would be followed up on in the next release. And blissfully gone is any sort of timer to force you through the game at warp speed. Interestingly, both games feature tracks we'll be seeing again in Wonder Boy and Monster World. We'll talk about them more when we get there, but take a listen to the final round theme from Monster Lair, as well as the Versus Dragon theme from the Dragon's Trap. Speaking of Monster World, it's about time we move on to the 3rd game in this Wonder Boy collection, 1991's Wonder Boy in Monster World for the Sega Genesis, aka Wonder Boy 5 Monster World 3. Set sometime after Monster Lair, and not the game Japan calls Monster World 2, we follow a young man named Shion as he seeks to save Monster World from dark forces attacking the peaceful people of the land. First of all, right off the back, like I said before, the timers are gone forever. Hallelujah, you can play this game entirely at your own pace, and it only benefits from this. Abandoning entirely the arcade-style gameplay of its forebears, Wonder Boy in Monster World isn't just a wonderfully open exploration action platformer with RPG elements, it's even, dare I say it, just the tiniest bit of a Metroidvania. I know. We'll get there. The very start of the game should look very familiar. It's actually the opening screens of Monsterland that we showed you before. But things very quickly deviate as Shion crosses past the closed gates to Purple Castle, only to be told that no entry will be permitted. So Shion continues on across some tropical islands until reaching the fairy village of Alcedo, which has been suffering a recent attack by the Myconids, a race of mushroom-like beings that appeared in Monsterland, as well as made their home in the nearby temple, entered by way of what looks to be a giant cavernous maw of sorts, very Zelda. In fact, a little time spent by the town statue of the fairy queen Eleonora takes you to meet her, where she has you take a fairy companion along with, named Priscilla. There's even a neat mechanic here where you recover a lost ocarina and are taught a set of 3 7-note tunes to help unlock enchanted doors that deliver you to the leader of the assault. Sadly, unlike other games that come before it, Wonder Boy in Monster World, strictly speaking, has just 6 bosses, but they do make the most of their time here. First up is the Myconid, perhaps the most normal of the crew. Very similar to its appearance in Monsterland, the Myconid bounds around the arena, spitting out smaller enemies to busy up the battlefield. It can be a bit of a chaotic mess, and the juggling that happens from any contact damage can quickly become a mounting issue, but if you picked up a small spear from the village weapon shop, you should be able to take the Myconid down and restore peace to Alcedo. Returning to Queen Eleonora has her point you back in the direction of Purple Castle by way of a hollowed-out tree, an underwater cave, and a sewer system. Lovely. One thing I really like about this game is how dense and interconnected it can manage to feel at times. There aren't really any, circular paths you can travel across, but while these sewers take you to a quick fight against a dark knight and rescue the princess, it also has passages that lead to later areas as well. The actual city of Purple is in a sense your main hub, with paths to 4 different areas open at the outset, and another 4 added in later on. It's also where you'll find a pair of equipment shops, one which opens midway through the game, and another pair of odd shops related to a rare item called the Charm Stone. Give this guy a Charm Stone, and it'll give you an extra heart, or even more magic if you have more than one on you. Thankfully, we can just buy it from this other guy for 500,000 gold! Wow, we found the only thing more expensive than Wonder Boy in Monsterland. After climbing a few thousand stairs and meeting with the princess, you laboriously walk down the same stairs much more slowly, thanks devs, and continue on your journey deep into the forest, where a village of dwarves called Lilypad is mourning the young Hota, who was kidnapped by local natives. Let's not dive into that. Just go in, get him, swing on back, grab the marine boots for quicker walking, and dive on into the nearby ruins, where he just punches the shit out of walls to reveal treasures. Hell yeah. The ruins themselves are kind of neat. You have to wander around in the dark at first until you beat up a bat to get a lantern to light the way, and after digging around, taking note of a weird passage you can't enter, and solving a 4-switch puzzle that notably does not have a solution anywhere, you just have to do it until you get it right, you come across the second bosses of the game, the rocky duo of Grag and Glag. It's nice to see a bit of variety in these boss designs. These guys spit boulders that roll across the floor and fire tiny rocks from their noses that you have to jump to dodge, all while struggling to get close enough to do damage with your weapon of choice. Granted, as soon as they're defeated, you get your mandatory new weapon of choice, the Trident, which, if you head back to the sewers, will allow you to swim underwater instead of floating atop it. At this point, the bosses fall back for a bit and the game becomes a lot more exploratory in nature. In a new ocean area, you need to find an amulet in a treasure chest behind a hidden door in order to reveal Poseidon's shrine, an aquatic maze filled with pretty trivial little puzzles involving deactivating and dodging underwater currents. At the end of it all, you meet Poseidon himself. He points you in the direction of the pyramid, lets you swipe his sweet desert kicks, don't know why he's got those, don't worry about it, and you're off to the Mogum Desert. Mogum? Monsterland had a place called the Mam Desert, M-A-M, but maybe that was meant to be pronounced more like Mom Desert? And this one's spelled like a town in New England, so you know half of these letters are silent too. I'm gonna go with Mom. So Mom Desert is interesting as you can technically enter it the moment you arrive in Purpril, but if you don't have the Oasis boots equipped, you'll quickly take damage and die of hot feet, I guess. There's actually a neat little reference to Monsterland in here, in an optional spot where you can fall into an underground cave and need to defeat enemies to create platforms to get yourself back out. And once you're done with that, you eventually arrive at the pyramid, which you then climb and descend and zigzag through all the way, leading you eventually to the Sphinx. again. Fortunately, this game is a little less bullshit. Instead of having you memorize some randomly generated factoid, this game gives you a 5-question quiz about the game thus far. How well you answer determines your fate, ranging from instant death, kicking you out of the entire pyramid, or just the room itself, or gleefully congratulating you again. Or hell, if you ace his quiz, you actually get free thunder magic. That's pretty cool. Regardless, once you're done with him, you can climb to the top of the pyramid, and we're off to the dragon village of Begonia, where everyone distrusts you except the elder dragon, who gives you a bracelet and tells you to get the fuck out and head for the ice world to obtain the old axe. Thankfully, you don't have to wander back through the desert. There are helpful doors to warp you back to Purple handy, and after clambering through the sewers a third time, you arrive at a small glacier with a convenient little ice door with the bracelet just melts away. Enemies in the ice world are a bit of a pain in the ass. This entire chapter is slippery as fuck, and the enemies you face don't give a single icy shit, just like last time. Hooray! It's honestly not even that uncommon to get knocked backwards into the next screen, which respawns the enemies, so that's great. Returning to the original formula for the game, we find a village, Childom, pick up a new friend named Shabo, and make our way through the ice castle, defeating a few beefed up enemies and collecting and placing gems, leading us to our third boss fight of the game, the Ice Bomber. Somehow I feel like the developers wanted to add just a teeny bit of monster layer to this game, as the Ice Bomber fight is an auto-scroller, complete with the boss itself hovering through the air freely. But rather than flying upon a dragon to fight, you have to navigate frozen over platforms that make you wish your sword had a bit more sword. Even adoring this game and playing it for decades, I find myself bouncing off the boss constantly. Once the Ice Bomber is down, you get to open the chest and get, they said old axe, but that kind of looks like a stone axe. Huh. I wonder. Regardless, you get to warp back to Childom, then warp back to Purple, then warp back to Begonia just in time to discover that you need to warp all over the goddamn map to continue. See, some monsters stole the dragon's fire urn that's necessary to turn the old axe into the legendary sword, but the door to enter these monsters' volcano lair is too tiny for Xion to enter normally, which means he needs to utilize a special magic spell in order to shrink himself down to enter. Problem is, the dragon in charge of this special chamber won't let you in unless you have all 4 pieces of the Pygmy equipment set. Now, if you've been attentive and perhaps a bit completionist on your way through the game up to this point, you may very well have all 4 pieces, but this becomes a lot more directionless and difficult if you haven't. One of them is literally in the first real level of the game once you have the ability to swim. So, once you've completed the 4 pieces and return, you step onto the panel and there you go, Pygmy Xion, ready to dive on in with your dragon buddy Loto. Man, this game is borrowing from everybody. The Begonia volcano is pretty cool. While they keep Xion tiny, the enemies are by and large massive by comparison, which drives home the idea that these are normal-sized monsters that you're forced to take on while shrunken. It's pretty neat. Overall, it's actually a pretty straightforward dungeon, topped off with the Tyrant Dragon, who you can actually sort of stun lock if you're a very lucky boy. And while you do so, you remember that Versus Dragon theme from Dragon's Trap? Well, it's back. So you defeat the Tyrant Dragon, you grab the Fire Urn, and now's your chance to do a little bit of that Metroidvaniaizing. That's a word, yeah. It's not much, to be fair, but in both the Pyramid and the Forest Ruins, there are spots where only a shrunken Xion can enter, and you get yourself some sweet goodies, including the game's one and only findable Charmstone. Anyway, head on back to Begonia when you're all done to have the legendary sword made, and swing by Purple Castle to check on the princess one more time before heading on up into the sky, where after a tiny bit of cloud hopping and stair climbing, we arrive at Nightmare Castle. You recognize that music, don't you? So fucking good. I love it. And this dungeon doesn't just borrow the music from the Labyrinth of No End. It too is a maze of hallways dying to send you back the way you came. But hey, guess what? There's no fucking timer. So you can pace yourself and survive. Who'da thunk it? And hell, the things you're dealing with aren't just figure out which exit is the right one anymore. There's a sweet high-speed minecart style section, there's the legendary armor, shield, and boots to find, and they even brought back the dropping platform sequence in a way that makes sense and is doable and isn't just a straight line the whole way. Weirdly enough, there's a segment where you fight a pair of skeleton knights in a room where the music suddenly changes to the boss theme of Gragan Glag and the Ice Bomber for some reason. These guys aren't that hard either. It's a really weird directorial decision. And then you fight a different purple dragon with the same versus dragon theme. This is such a confusing moment. Are they trying to imply like that this is the Mecha Dragon or just another randomly also purple dragon hanging out in the final castle besides like the Tyrant? It's so weird. But if you get to the top of the castle, you're confronted with a familiar-ish style of fight in the almighty Demon King. If you think he looks weird now, wait until you do enough damage to his face to knock his head off. Just like the antagonist of the first Wonder Boy game, King, this guy keeps regrowing new heads with harder attack patterns. And to make matters worse, his discarded heads will attack you as well. Knocking out 3 of his heads will free him of the form Biomecha forced on him, returning to his human body as the Prince of the Dark World. He sends you on your way, and you get to fly into fucking space to enter the lair of Biomecha, which also features reused music. This time it's that jam from Monster Lair. Inside, Xion must face off against the 4 bosses again to reveal the path to the final battle, which is substantially easier than it sounds, actually, considering the bosses have exactly the same amount of health as they did the first time around, and you're not even shrunk down to fight the Tyrant Dragon this time either. Once they're defeated, it's time for the final encounter with Biomecha, set to the first boss battle theme of the game. You know, the one where you fought a big mushroom guy? Get used to this track, by the way. After one of the more annoying must-lose battles in video games, seriously, do not waste any of your magic here. The prince shows up to throw himself at Biomecha's energy weapon so you have a shot at a fair fight, which, whoo, fucking boy, are you gonna need, because this boss may very well be tougher than trying to fight the other 4 all in one room. At first, it's not a terrible fight. Biomecha has these like laser turrets come in on these tracks along the ceiling, and the beams will turn in midair once to try and nail you while you're dodging them. The real problem is how close you need to get to Biomecha in order to damage it, which is not helped one bit by the start of the second phase. See, once you've dealt enough damage to destroy Biomecha's helmet, the floor becomes a super fast conveyor belt with a circ saw running back and forth over it. Oh, and also a second laser turret starts shooting the shit out of you too. And the conveyor belt will randomly change directions. Not that you could tell, considering the conveyor belt animation is only 2 frames, so forward and backward look literally the same. And you take contact damage from Biomecha and every other thing in the room as well, so good luck not getting juggled to death. This fight used to fuck me up big time as a kid. You absolutely want your best potion coming in here, and judicious use of the power and shield spells will help increase your offense and defense accordingly to hopefully help you survive. If you manage to bring Biomecha back down to 0 a second time, you get to watch Xion warp away as Biomecha's entire fucking planet explodes. And the credits begin. And the boss theme does not end. Huh. Yeah, so the entire credits are set to the first-ass boss theme. What? To be fair, there is a different music track for this little epilogue that shows you what everyone's up to after all is said and done, complete with a surprisingly smooth transition back into a creepy tune as we see Biomecha has escaped for one last fight. Hey, wait a second, what the fuck? Is that the music for the first dungeon of the game? Did they do this soundtrack backwards? Honestly, upon replaying it for this review, Wonder Boy and Monster World remains one of my absolute favorite titles on the Sega Genesis. It's a breezy playthrough you can get through in a long afternoon or a weekend, and honestly, it's shocking to me that 3 of this franchise's 6 titles released before the turn of the century have gotten remasters, but not this one. That is criminal. Holy hell, is this game good. Where's my Wonder Boy, Xion, and Monster World remake for the Switch? Anyway, with 3 down, that leaves us with 1 more to go. Monster World 4, now known a bit better by its remaster's title, Wonder Boy, Asha, and Monster World, despite Wonder Boy not being in this game. Or any playable boy, for that matter. Xion actually does get mentioned in a book in this one, though, so that's a nice plus. So, Monster World 4 is a game very much like Wonder Boy and Monster World in many ways, but it does scale things back a good deal, resulting in a more streamlined and linear experience. With Wonder Boy and Monster World, the game was technically somewhat open-ended, but it did generally nudge you in a specific direction once you had new equipment and information, much like Metroid Dread compared to the more open-ended Metroid and Super Metroid and the fully linear Metroid 2 and Metroid Fusion. Monster World 4 is, for all intents and purposes, a linear game once more, segmented into progress-based chapters that, once completed, cannot be returned to. So that does unfortunately mean missable upgrades such as life drops, which will grant you additional hearts upon collecting 10 of them. These life drop hearts act the same as normal hearts, so getting them sooner rather than later is a big plus, as you can wind up with a maximum of 30 hearts this time around. Taking on a more Arabian Nights kind of vibe, you play as Asha, a warrior who sets out to defeat Biomecha, now known to the people as Fear Incarnate, after it returns to flood the world with monsters once more. Upon leaving your home of Estefan Village, you head to the Tower of Silence, where you get to check out some of the changes from the previous formula, including an always-equipped shield you raise by pressing down, and the ability to stab upward or downward in midair. However, your ability to use magic has been entirely removed in this game, so you're going to be relying completely on melee attacks. There's also this creepy old dude who seems to warp all over the place and offers to let you save your game. I don't know anything about this guy, and I already immediately distrust him. Get away from me. The Tower of Silence is honestly surprisingly dense for a tutorial dungeon. There's a good amount of stuff going on here, and once you've defeated the boss and claimed the magic lamp, the genie within will whisk you away to Rapadagna City, the home of Queen Purapril XIII. This city is even more of a hub than Purapril Castletown from the last game, but immediately something seems off about the place. There's this spooky guy giving out creatures known as Pepe Logu, little yellow dudes that appear to be taking the town by storm, even though no one really seems to know why they want one. In fact, over the course of the game, the citizens of Rapadagna slowly become more and more irritable and cruel to one another, greedily hoarding Pepe Logu, shutting themselves away from the world and distancing themselves from their own families over them. This in turn was a plot by the 4 elemental wizards working under Biomecha to sow discord and spread the negative emotions that it feeds on. After visiting the queen, Asha is given permission to raid the castle vault for supplies, money, anything she might need to set out on her journey, where she finds a single Pepe Logu egg. How did that get there anyway? Regardless, bringing it back to the fountain you arrived at, hatches the egg, and Asha befriends the rare blue Pepe Logu inside. Asha and Pepe Logu's teamwork is perhaps the most important gameplay change from Wonder Boy and Monster World, as together they have the ability to hover slowly to the ground, allowing them to cross great distances they couldn't otherwise. In fact, overall, this game focuses substantially more on platforming than combat compared with its stiffer, more rigorous predecessor. It gives Monster World 4 a lot more flow, but the linear, chapter-based nature of the game leaves a lot to be desired compared with Wonder Boy and Monster World, and I think the best possible version of a Monster World game blends the platforming of this game and the open-ended exploration of the last. Over the course of the game, Asha continues to feed Pepe Logu to make him grow stronger, but doing so changes what he's capable of from one stage to the next, both in terms of platforming and special abilities like blocking fire, and this more than likely is what resulted in the devs deciding to make each level of the game a one-and-done that you can't return to. Each of the 4 main levels of the game are reached by walking through a very tall gate in the local temple, which leads to a brief set of outdoor areas, and then eventually a temple, shrine, or ruins where the actual dungeon exists. There's admittedly not a lot to say about this, which is a shame as it's the main chunk of the game, but there seems to be a lot less plot going on in this game, and because there's only one town and a limited number of citizens in them, many of which disappear over the course of the game, there's not a lot of room for this story to breathe. There are 2 new things that are worth noting, however. One is the arrival of elemental damage, which different shields can help protect against better or worse until late in the game, and also that the 3rd area of the game, the Ice Pyramid, is long as fuck. You get to see the Sphinx one more time, and he even quizzes you again, but the bastard of the thing is that he has keys to 3 separate dungeons within the pyramid, all of which are about the size of any other one dungeon in the game. I spent an hour and a half in just this one level. It's long. As you progress through these dungeons, you eventually square off against one of the elemental wizards, which all feel like rejected Gunstar Heroes bosses, if I'm being brutally honest. And your prize each time is freeing an old companion of Shion, tasked with protecting the land as one of its sacred spirits. It's a really great way to tie these 2 games together, I think. It's rad. Frustratingly, very often in these dungeons, you unexpectedly reach points that you cannot easily return from, meaning if you're searching for all 150 life drops, for example, you're going to wind up using the magic lamp to go back to Rapadagna and restart the area all over just to be sure you didn't miss anything. And you usually didn't, for the record. After the first 3 spirits are freed, returning to Rapadagna reveals that the shit has seriously hit the fan. Citizens are horrible to each other, shops are shutting down left and right, the woman who's been giving you increasing piles of money for gold bars is just fucking gone, and the queen has become so corrupted by the Pepe Logus suddenly turning dark and scary that she attacks you outright and kills your Pepe Logu. She kills your Pepe Logu. Wow, that is a weird sentence to emphasize like that. So once the queen leaves, you now have to head to the Sky Castle all by yourself. There's a little auto-scrolling segment a la Sky Chase Zone and a sequence where you approach the castle that takes a year and a half, and despite it being a golden opportunity to use that banger of a Sky Castle theme one more time, no, it's just some ridiculously twisty-turny wrap back around on itself dungeon in the sky with new music. It's okay. It does feature a cute little segment where you shrink yourself and fight comparatively huge versions of the enemies you've been fighting already, though, so that's a nice thumbs up from me. Beating the Cloud Wizard and freeing Priscilla has you return to Rapadagna once more, landing in front of a huge egg. Wonder what that's all about. Where in order to enter the Queen's chambers, you have to admit to the one sane soldier keeping the door shut that you do not have a plan. If you say you do, he rightly tells you you're full of shit, so you have to openly admit that you're just winging it for him to go along with it. That's fucking great. I love that. So anyway, you fight the Queen again, where she does 5 hearts of damage per hit instead of the 1 during the practice round. Holy hell. Granted, this is another sneaky must-lose fight, and when you're down to your last heart, the Queen taunts you and tells you to call for your Pepe Logu, knowing that he's dead and cannot save you. Except, boom, baby, here comes the chunky boy, who sings. And the other Pepe Logu leave. The Queen, who is now freed from the spell of the Pepe Logu, suggests that yours might be like an ancestor of all the rest. Okay. Heading back outside her chambers, a huge hole is opened up to an underground fort where every enemy type and non-wizard boss in the game awaits you in succession. And hey, wait a sec, do you hear that? Nice. And upon entering the final doorway, you stand face to eye with Fear Incarnate, Biomecha. After dispatching a few Black Pepe Logu, Biomecha steps forward to take you on itself, and you do battle with its tentacle eyes? This is getting weird, though thankfully after a while, Pepe Logu arrives and turns himself to stone to help you defeat Biomecha. And a few hits later, Fear Incarnate is defeated for good. Credits ensue, Pepe Logu is brought back to life again, the old guy turns out to not be anything important at all, and the genie breaks the fourth wall to thank you for playing and tell you outright that the Monster World series is over. That's a hell of a closer there. I think the 2 Mega Man series on the Game Boy Advance are the only other sets of games I can even think of that actively tell you, yes, this series is over. And that was Wonder Boy Collection. It may very well be worth the cost just for Wonder Boy and Monster World 4 alone, but if you're a masochist like I apparently am, you'll get an uncomfortable amount of replay value out of the first 2 arcade titles in the mix as well. Now, I'll be honest, if you can get your hands on the Anniversary Edition with Monster Lair and Dragon's Trap, that's going to be the best bang for your buck for sure, but failing that, you can do a lot worse than this. And just to prove it... Ooh, there we go! Whoa, that was close. Holy cow. Oh! Why? Holy shit. Oh god, another one? Oh good, more wing boots. Good. I was hoping for... You want to give me some money? I just want to know if it's fucking possible. I'm so floored by the entire situation. There we go. It's like, I really don't want to use up my revival potion already. Man, if we found a way to accidentally stun lock it into this corner. Oh, these conveyor belts. It's my fucking kryptonite in video games. Hey, we got a blue one. Look at our new friend. If he never draws his shield, then I can't do anything about it. What? Pepe Logo, no!